Massive thank you as always to our top tier patrons Sarah Turner and Alexander Lashley. For as little as $3 you can gain access to patron only episodes as well as access to our Discord server where we host weekly live discussions with host Ikoi Hero and myself. So if you like what you hear, come join us at patreon.com/it's not just in your head. Please do rate us on Apple Podcasts and follow us on social media. We're on Reddit, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you have any questions or comments about this episode or the podcast in general, then email itsnotjustinyourhead@gmail.com.
In the mental health field, too often, we've made it seem as if it's just in your head.
The landlord can hijack the rent by 20%. That impacts people's mental health.
Can't have a profit-driven mental health care system if we want our people to be connected and healthy.
So who are you? I'm talking to these two humans, Eric Levy and Jeffrey Jones. You guys can say whatever your fancy titles are and everything if you'd like to. You're both members of Phoenix Mental Health. Can you actually, before I ask you like the formal question, like you want to just in your own words, what is Phoenix Mental Health? Why should I care? What's the relevance of this place you work at?
Yeah, you want to take it, Jeff?
What is this? What are we doing?
What are we doing? What are we doing?
What's going on? What time is it? What day is it?
Got existential really quick.
Right.
Welcome.
Good. Yep. Good question. Yep. So why does it matter? Because now somebody could definitely check me on my history of this, but I've kept looking this up and looking up, and I couldn't find it. But I believe that we're at least the first. I just want to say for the past 20 years, the first collectively run mental health clinic in what I believe is in North America. Now,
holy crap.
I know there was a bunch of stuff like in the 70s and 60s that were kind of trying to do stuff, but I haven't found that they have existed or that continue to exist. So why does it matter? Is because we are putting our feet to where our mouths are. We're trying to do the work.
I'm going to see if I can do that on the screen. Here's my foot. And
almost.
Yeah, right?
So I understand that there was, what is it called? I think maybe it was Center Point in Wisconsin that they tried. I think there's been like attempts and experiments and stuff. And then other than you guys, anyway, I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit.
No, you're right.
There were a bunch of people. I think this was like 8 years ago or something, if I'm getting my time right. We should interview them too. But it was a bunch of people that worked at a community mental health clinic. And there was stuff they didn't like. I'll like put it nicely. It's like the stuff that, we often experience in community mental health and everything. And like a group of them, I think, tried to do it. And I think they lasted a couple of years, but somehow finances didn't work or something like that. But, and I suspect there's other things, but anyway, I'm not trying to be contrarian here, by the way. I believe that you are, I believe that you guys are, well, I know for sure you're one of the only collectively owned or worker cooperative. I don't know what language is the exact appropriate on the nail. I was going to frame it as as what I understand is you guys run as a worker cooperative.
Yes.
So that's accurate as well. Okay. So how about, let's just break that down. Like what does this mean? What does it mean to be a worker co-op or collectively owned? Like how do you guys run your mental health clinic in that way? How is that different from how other clinics run and so on?
Yeah. And I think that is the difference to answer that question first and then answer this one next. The idea that there are a lot of bigger systems that are coming through, and insurance wise, and God bless them, they pay our bills, but they tend to not want to deal with, they would like to streamline things. And so these other systems, these Park Nicolettes and whatnot, have therapists, and it's easier to deal with them when you have them in a big group. And in doing that, it's nice because it does streamline things for them, but it takes away from the integrity of the therapeutic relationship. It takes away the ability to have creativity. It takes away, being able to deliver services in ways that, are tailored to the individual rather than, the system. And what we're doing here in our collective is just that. And we're trying to find people who are similar enough in their ideas and their values, but are different enough in what they bring, in the creativity and culture wise, and we're kind of a hodgepodge, ragtag sort of situation. And that's great. We pride ourselves on being different and not being like that, and being able to say, you know what, I don't have to be done at 45 minutes. I can go over a little bit, or hey, I could be a little bit more flexible with the schedule. And if you can't make it in at 1, hey, I'll see you at 5. And this is again, delivering services, putting a person-centered approach to it for me. And that's, Jeff, it can get really weird when we start talking about the collaborative and semantics and whatnot. But ultimately, for me, that's kind of the joy that I get out of it, and how I see our collective. Whether we're the first or the only, I have no idea. I'd like to think there's more. I'd like to think there's more.
It's like the North Point, whatever was in Wisconsin. I forgot all about that. I remember reaching out to them years and years and years ago. And so, yeah. And so I would say like this isn't part of the question, but I would say a nucleus for this was that I was doing private practice for many years. And one of the things is like, I was getting to a point where I was like always busy, and I was but I was needing to work with other like, coworkers and, other therapists. But the nucleus for it, though, wasn't just that. That happens to a lot of people. The nucleus, though, was I really saw like these larger systems. First of all, this is going to be like duh, probably to most people hear this, but toxic work environments. And what is that? Like, first of all, it's a buzzword, but a lot of that has to do with racism, sexism, non-transparency, hierarchy, bosses, management, CEOs that are not in it for the therapist, are not in it for the clients, the patients, the people that we work with. And there's much more that we could go into with that, but a part of it though too was seeing the insurance companies as a major boss in our industry, where we have to tailor our work to what the insurance companies say we have to do. And yet there is nobody arguing for those of us who have to take insurance. And I always saw that as like basically a non-union workplace. Even if you are a solo practitioner, but you take therapists or you take insurance, you are now not working towards what you feel is the most like important work for that client, but for what the insurance wants. And so what I thought about at first was like, well, how to do that? Like, there is nobody, like, we have our different boards, like we have the social work boards, we have the, counselor boards, we have all these things, but these boards are not working for you. They are not. They are working for the state. They are paid by the state. They are appointed by the state. They are hardly elected by the people who, and so you tend to think that they're going to bat for you on, capitals. Like, do you think that they're like, every time that the insurance companies are negotiating new prices, you feel like you believe that you like that there's people who are lawyering up and battling for you, making sure you're getting the best like prices, if you will, from getting paid the best from. It's not happening. There's nobody, no one. And one of the things that I had thought about was like, well, what about a consumer union? Like an actual consumer union, not like, so there's the worker co-op, and then there's like and I think of like a workers or a consumer union as in like, I mean, in the US it's a joke, but throughout most of the world, there's like student unions, for example, are very powerful. Like I remember the fight, probably like what 7 years ago, I think in Montreal, where the student unions basically closed down the city. And they were like, you are going to negotiate with us when you talk about raising prices on us. You are not going to just do this without us. That's kind of the nucleus of where this was born out of, though, and how to create that certain counterpower to this. It's weird to say consumer union when I actually feel like it's a union versus like boss, but the best way to argue this in the US context is consumer union. And so that was like, so again, that was like the nucleus, because I also knew that you ain't taking this on personally. You need to have like a power base in order to even think about having that conversation.
Well, let me see if I understand, because like I sent you guys those questions, and I'm realizing going through question by question is like probably not the best way, actually, because there's a few things I want to touch on now. Like one is that now I'm thinking like, well, wait, so is Phoenix Mental Health, is it those two things? Is it a worker co-op where you guys make decisions collectively and there's a consumer union or consumer co-op element to it where like the clients, so yeah, no, is that?
No, it's not.
Okay.
That's the nucleus of how this started into.
Okay. Just like conversations about like, here's how it works. That's pretty screwed up. They should work this way and that way kind of thing. And then.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Just a quick comment on that before I think, because imagine if there were like healthcare consumer unions or collectives that, if people march in the streets saying like, no, you can't charge me more for this procedure, or you know what, Cigna or United Healthcare, or just choose the private insurer and just saying, look, we're going to march over to your central corporate office and we're going to demand that you actually compensate for couple care, or that you pay the same rate for family sessions as individual sessions, since you don't, because my therapist, the providers deserve the same pay or whatever. I mean, I've never heard of that happening in the US, if people actually like flexing on the private insurance companies. But now that you're saying it, I'm like, that'd be the most rad thing ever. It'd be so cool. So now, like, anyway, there's just all this whole web of thought in my head now where I'm like, okay, that's an important conversation. But back to Phoenix, I'm curious, like what, compared to, so let's say, okay, so my personal experience at a community mental health clinic for 5 years out of grad school, everything you started with, Jeffrey, of the CEOs, managers, the hierarchy, I'm a white guy, so the racism and sexism piece didn't impact me personally so much, but I'm sure there's elements of that at that clinic. But there was not a culture of like every, that any clinician could just sort of put forth a proposal and people could maybe discuss and debate it, and then there'd be a decision made or something like that. It was a hierarchy just the same as any, I don't know, like Amazon or Starbucks or a factory, right? It literally had the same hierarchy and the same, shut up and do your notes quicker, take on a higher caseload, with not much discussion, right?
Yeah.
So that was my experience in community mental health, which, going back to the toxic work environment, where I was like, man, I went to school to like be a therapist, and this feels like I'm in some like industrial grind. Like I'm in like a factory, and they're trying to like get them in, get them out. And they just see me as a unit of productivity, and there's no transparency. So based on that, and I think probably most clinicians they go through their training programs, they pile on their student debt, and then the first place they go as a requirement is community mental health. And my guess would be the majority, if not the vast majority, would agree with everything I just said and that you said. They'd be like, yeah, that's exactly how it is, no matter where you go. And there's probably places where it's a little better or a little worse. But in comparison, how does it work at Phoenix compared to all that?
I remember working in those systems, and it does feel sort of like mixed therapy. And you're right. And I remember having, my heart in the right place, I hoped, is just learning the systems, working within the systems, and still being able to deliver what you want to do and be person-centered. And you can do that in those systems, but it's so hard. It's so hard when, no one really gives a fig about what your consult is, and they're more worried about your case notes or more worried about you getting your time card in on time and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh, whatever. You have to deal with all of that. In our system, we are sort of our own bosses, and we kind of, there are 7 of us, and we all come from different backgrounds. We all do different types of therapy. But we all share a very social, person-centered approach, and we both are dedicated. We all come out of those systems. And the great thing about the systems is you go in and you learn everything, you do it to the T. You learn everything that they tell you to do, and then you do it as great as anybody has ever done it there. And then you're kind of like, well, I need more. I need more in the toolbox. It's an art. If you look at somebody like Picasso, he went to school, he drew exactly what they told him to do, and then he said, that was great, but now I have to do something different. It has to change. And these systems really don't allow for that. They want to keep the status quo. They want to keep, and that's running a business. That's not doing therapy, and it's different. And okay, so that's not what we're doing. We're running a business. Let's be honest. We've had that argument before, but we're giving each other the freedom to grow as therapists, and the freedom to tailor what we do to the individual. And we do take insurance, and we do follow all the rules of insurance. But you know what? I also help people who are poor, who have really crappy insurance, navigate those systems. That's also, as far as my social justice responsibility, to help those people navigate these crazy systems, because it's what we got. But yeah, there's 7 of us. We see all sorts of clientele. We made it a goal to this year was in the past years is to diversify. Is constant. I am a white guy, and it is important that I don't surround myself with a bunch of other white guys. It's not going to help me grow. It's not going to help me learn. And we've done that. We're doing that now, and I'm very, very excited about it, because it's constantly learning. It's not like I'm in the system, I've learned it, and now I'm just going there. It's like in this system, we have the ability to really grow. And I do the same thing with my clients too. I really like diversity there, because I need to know.
Yeah. So I'll ask this question. I feel like we already touched on it a little bit, but it's one of the written ones, but it's sort of this, what I would describe as sort of 2 kinds of motivations for this kind of work, or, the worker co-op work, I guess. One is, you might just say ideological, like you identify as something like, anarchist, Marxist, socialist, whatever the appropriate sort of left-wing label is, right? And some people are super attracted to that, of like, I am an X, right? I'm a socialist, and so this is how I want to do things. And then there's another side that's maybe more practical, that says, you know what, where I work, I want there to be financial transparency. I want everyone to have a say. I think it will feel better for me. Like, I will be happier. I will be more satisfied when I walk into work. My relationships with my coworkers will be better. And those two they're not in contrast. You can be motivated by both. But for you guys, would you say, are you tilted more one way or the other, right? That you're just like, I'm an anarcho something, and this is my whole thing, or just in practicality, so the ideology versus practicality, I guess, would be the distinctions.
That's a good question. So yes, I am lifelong anarchist. Okay, that's just where I come from. But by being lifetime, I'm almost 50. Like, I have seen the different things that become problems when you get lost in labels. And one of the things is, like, we can have a whole podcast sort of around anarchism and mental health. Okay, that's one thing. Problem is that I find, especially in our field and mental health, is that most people who go into it I don't know. I don't know their politics. I would say basic liberals or whatever.
Yes,
if you will.
100,000% agree with you. Yeah.
Okay. Like, there's no critique after maybe racism or sexism or some things like this. So, but I've always found though that these labels, say as an anarchist, I don't need to use that word.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't necessarily use that word and you just do the stuff, like having a workers' co-op that is completely 100% owned, that is anarchism without talking about it, basically. And we have 7 people in the collective right now that I think I'm the only one who would say that, probably. And yet they're doing it, kind of thing. And so, does the label matter? I'm not convinced that it does. The only times I'm convinced that it does is that we definitely say we come from like a social justice framework, whatever that means. That's pretty huge compared to everybody, like every individual. But the main reason why I say it's important is that, like, well, let's say somebody's brutalized by the state somehow, police brutality, whatever it is, somebody's been incarcerated. I don't want them to think that they're going to a neutral therapist who has no sides, kind of thing. They need to know they feel safe, that they're in a place that is like going to stick up for them, is going to like have empathy, is not going to argue with them. Well, what were you doing, kind of thing. And I think that the label can be important for those types of situations, and it definitely happens. I've definitely worked with a lot of activists throughout the years who have been brutalized, whether it's through a riot, through police shooting tear gas. There's many things or whatever. Like, and these aren't just these things. It's also systems of poverty and systems of a lot of different things. But again, when it comes to that, like, I always feel like I would say as an anarchist, you can talk about mutual aid, you can talk about direct democracy, you can talk about, non-hierarchy, and almost everybody will get it. And they're with you. As soon as you use the word anarchism, people get freaked out, kind of thing. So I just tend to say whatever. I don't care. I'm not like committed to the word. Yeah. I'm committed to what it means.
So I'm kind of hearing from you that you're both. I mean, you are ideologically motivated, and I'm very much like that too. Like, it's almost like a primary driver, and it's almost like there's a practicality to the, to use the nerdy word praxis, right? That like if you have the theory, if you have maybe some anarchist theory in your brain, you've read your stuff or whatever, you've eaten up and digested your propaganda, and then you go, well, what does it look? How do I live my life like that? And then you go, oh, well, if we're running our business enterprise because we have to pay bills, like, kind of none of us really want to work at the end of the day, but we have to, and we live in a wage labor system. Might as well do it like a work co-op, and it aligns with my values, right? So I kind of hear that you're like a little bit, I don't want to say more ideologically motivated, but maybe a little bit. It's like the fuel of the fire, and then secondarily, there's like there's a practicality that almost comes out of it, that it just feels better, it works better, and it aligns with my values. That'd be like my interpretation of what you just said. Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But I don't think that most people like in our group would even hear those words from me. Like,
yeah, you're not like, you go to these meetings and you're like, well, as an anarchist, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
like, you just don't
like,
you don't say it. Yeah,
you'd be like, oh god, the people would roll their eyes or whatever.
Yeah. Like, what the hell is
a funny way?
About? Yeah,
nobody would fight it. That's not it either. Nobody cares. It's
he does talk like that at the meetings.
And, well, and one of the, I think where I learned some of this too was I was one of the initial beginners. I wasn't the only one, but there's like 4 or 5 of us. Started the Twin Cities IWW, which is now defunct.
Oh, shit! Wow.
And that was in 2004, and that was probably one of the biggest branches of the IWW for a long time, I want to say. But one of the things with that is that with like IWW, it don't matter if you're a freaking anarchist, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter. It's what you do with it, right? And not that we had many Republicans, but we actually had, not here, but I mean, there was some in it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm somewhat recently approved to be an OT 101 trainer, like a baby trainer for the IWW. So just as a small world, I guess.
There you go.
Similar circles, right? So yeah, Eric, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on that, this topic or.
This particular topic, we are actually early on when we were putting together the collaborative, we wanted it. This is one of the things that we talked about. Like, wouldn't it be great if we were all part of it? And we were at one point. But then you have 7 people and they're all independent thinkers. Guess what? It's going to be different. People don't want to do that. They're not comfortable with that. And if we're going to be true to what we're saying, we have to like drop that sort of uniformity and embrace the individualism. Call it whatever you want, but yeah, that got tricky for us, and it got trickier the more people that we added, because it was all of a sudden, okay, as a 3-piece, we had all these ideals, and it was all yeah, and all of a sudden, then number 4 and 5 come in, they're like, what?
Yep. Right.
So,
no, you're right. Like because I think with the IWW, I believe it's like, if you are a workers' co-op, every single person needs to be a paying dues member. But we had one person who wasn't going to, and that was that kind of thing.
That was that.
Oh, so like initially you were like, we're gonna do this like mental health worker co-op thing, but we're also gonna be like wobbly, like, IWW member. It's gonna be like part of this sort of a radical union thing. Okay. But
then we thought we were putting our money where our mouth is, and we were, and we still are, but we can't. By doing so, we can't enforce that on
Sure. Yeah.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
And some people didn't see the point behind it, I guess,
Sure.
Like power.
Well, it's funny because that runs into the, sort of ideology versus practicality piece too, right? Where like, I mean, I kind of wondered about that of like, well, why other than just feeling in my heart, I want to be in solidarity. What is the point of paying dues to IWW if I'm not actually in a workplace and part of an organizing campaign or part of a chapter? Is it just that I just believe, if I give, the minimum of $10-11 or whatever dues a month or something like that? Is it just, I want to support organizer stipends on the other side of the country of someone trying to organize a hot shop or whatever, or, because like, especially, this is a little bit of a side thing, but it's related. Like once I left community mental health, because I tried unionizing that same clinic for like 3 years, first starting with NUHW, which is they're the National Union of Healthcare Workers. They're mostly on the West Coast, and they broke off from SEIU, feeling that SEIU was and West and East Coast SEIU were totally different, but West Coast they're allegedly very corrupt, extremely top down, like sort of just business union all the way. So NUHW broke off as being like a much better, more democratic NUHW. But there's a certain point at which, when I think the organizer who initially was training me and a few others in our organizing committee, once they found that we probably weren't going to get everyone in the county in this agency, and then therefore probably weren't going to get move toward the election to get contracts, they kind of were kind of just fading away. They didn't say like, F off or anything. But when I discovered the IWW, they were like, well, we don't actually care. We don't even necessarily believe in the election process. Like, we don't even think the NLRB is like necessarily a legitimate, body to consider whether or not you're a union. Like, you can even, if just 5 out of 100 of you want to have an organizing committee and do this, this, and this, or slow down or strike or whatever the hell you want to do, you can do that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I was like super dedicated to sort of IWW out of the practicality, weirdly enough. Like, I wasn't like, I'm an anarcho-syndicalist or some crap. I was just like, oh, they'll just train you to organize your workplace. But anyway, that was really hard. I think circling back to like, everyone in our field is basically a generic liberal, that the lack of class consciousness and me like bashing my head into a wall, I found eventually this just isn't going to, it was 3 years and I was like, I can't do this anymore, kind of thing. So anyway, there's my IWW story. But after leaving, I'm technically not paying dues anymore, which is actually just because I changed my bank card or something. So I need to actually, I need to like put it back in. It's not because I didn't want to pay dues anymore. But like
it was a clerical error.
But like, it's just a stupid logistical thing. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Back to you guys. Well, okay. So I get it. There's both. There's the ideology, there's the value system, and then there's also the practicality. And you ran into the practical reality of like somebody doesn't necessarily see the use. Like, why should I be a wobbly? You know, we're just trying to be therapists in this collaborative thing. Like, why? What's the point of that? I'm sure you tried to make a case, and they're like, I'm not sold on that. And you went, okay, cool, that's fine. And then you moving on, right? And then you just kept going. So. Okay, so on the practical side of things, especially because I would love for, and I don't know with our podcast, I think when we first started it a couple of years ago, we wanted it to be sort of like agitation and propaganda into the mental health field, specifically for that reason of like our field is full of generic liberals that aren't thinking much about stuff, that we wanted to use it as propaganda into the field. So anyone listening that is like, well, wait a minute. So specifically, how does this work? If I wanted to do this with other therapists, so I want to see if I can get some of these logistical, like practical things. So how many, so you said there's 7 now, but I want to know, how many meetings do you have? Do you use consensus? Is it like, do you use like a majority vote? Or does that not apply? Is it just everyone sort of as an individual solo practice person, but they just come together and are like, like those kinds of like practical questions, right? Like how does it, in the nitty gritty, like how does that work internally?
As far as voting, yes, we try to reach consensus, but not everything needs consensus. And so sometimes it's called right then and there. But I'll back up. The only thing that we have down as like a rule for the place is we need 100% vote, so consensus, for somebody to become an owner with the co-op, and we have a high threshold 80% to fire somebody.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. And the way that we do it is that there's no buy-in, which there's a lot of collectives and co-ops out there that have done that, not mental health, but like, maybe you got to pay $5,000 or whatever to become an owner. We don't do anything like that. What we do, which is that, and I guess this is where the one part you could say, well, you're not being collective, but we say like, we have a 6-month period where somebody is basically an independent contractor. And so you could say, yep, you're being a boss in that time. And yet it's something like what we do is like a 90% split. Like they get 10% during this time, plus rent. The main issue is just, do you want to work with us? Do we want to work with you? We need to figure that out before becoming an owner. And 6 months, it is good because you're getting your feet like going with contracts with the insurance companies. You're doing a lot of different work. You're also getting a lot of support in it. But once you're an owner, again, 6 months, you're not buying in. You just get it. We vote, and that's it. You become an owner.
Okay.
Go
I have a couple of questions on that. So if I got that right, so it's like, so basically to be an owner, you have you need you need to vote on like whatever needs to get voted on, right? Like you can't, so it's 100% of the people need to be voting. You need 80% to fire. And then there's you guys aren't using this term, I don't think, probationary period, but that's maybe a common term, right? 6 month, I don't know, maybe trial, like feeling you out, like checking you out, seeing if it fits kind of thing. So like 6 months, but you're still, for the most part, I mean, that's what, so you're saying like you get 90% of the cut, whatever it is, self-pay or insurance, plus whatever the cost of rent is for shared rent. I wanted to ask about that too for rent of like, so do you guys have some like big building with a whole bunch of offices in it that everybody just shares, and you use some kind of coordination system for like who gets the time slots, or or is that like hell? I remember like, oh dude, no, I'm supposed to get room 2 at 4 p.m. Like, do you guys have that kind of stuff?
No, but it does. But it is, no, I mean, like, we pay. Maybe this will help with this answer when I say how we get paid.
Okay.
Because I know that we talked with the Alliance folks in New York, and the way that they get paid, that they pay themselves, is like basically like everybody gets paid the same amount no matter what.
Yeah, 40. I think it's 40 an hour, clinical and non-clinical, I believe, is their plus health insurance. I think that's their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We don't set it up that way. The way we set it up is you make 100% of what you make. So, you want to work 2 hours a week, great, you get 100. But you want to work 30 hours a week, great, you get that. The main thing is that you're always going to pay rent and bills.
Okay.
So you want to take a month off, that's fine. You're still on the hook for rent and bills.
Okay. Sorry, I'm writing this stuff. If you notice my fingers clicking and stuff, because I'm like trying to.
Sure.
Because I'm just, as a greedy, I've been moving toward trying to form one with others for like 2 years, and it's just really, Santa Barbara, California is like shit lib central, so it's just really hard. But so paying rent and bills. So if you do you have anybody that's like they're just doing 2 hours? Because I could actually imagine that being really tough if you did do 2 hours a week. And
that's where it doesn't help you out as much. Yeah.
Right. I could see there being a question of like, why am I involved in this? Right. Because you're like, oh, but now there's all this money for rent and bills. Right. And is that also, sorry to be so specific, but just as somebody who also wants to do this, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So the rent and bills, is that equally split? Is that more split around who does, like a proportionality, right? Of like, if you work 90% of if you do 90% of the labor, you pay. Well, no, that wouldn't make any sense, because I should just ask. So how does the rent work?
That's all predetermined. We have there are slight variations on what people pay for their individual offices. We have 5 offices at our main place. And, someone has their own office, they pay a little more. And that's something that was voted upon and agreed upon by the group. And that, that's the change. But ultimately you're paying your expenses and any major purchases or things, for like website or advertising. If we did that, all of that stuff is voted on. So
yeah. So it's five rooms. Wait, just to be clear on this. So there's 7 of you. So is it like the rent for the 5-room office or whatever, is that divided by 7 at this point? Or is it a little bit different based on like use or something like that?
No, it's
slightly different.
Yeah,
a little bit different. Like me and Eric share a room, so we both pay half, basically.
Oh,
of the rent.
Okay.
We pay a little less. It's not actually half, but yeah, it's a little less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's gonna fluctuate based upon who's in the collective, like coming and going, kind of thing. But that's basically what that looks like.
Okay.
And also to kind of answer like the Santa Barbara piece of like how to do it, we don't have any structure here, legal structure, if you will, for co-op for this. Like,
no,
we had to go to a lawyer who could work with cooperatives.
Yeah.
There is no business. I mean, business law in the U.S. is totally based on capitalism. It has nothing about co-ops.
What we're doing is hurting our lawyer's brain more than anything else.
Yeah.
She's like, you're doing what? Why? You can't do that. Well, right. Why not? Well, it's usually our response. Why not?
Well, I'm curious, like, so no legal structure. So does that mean every individual has, so California, well, here's what I know about New York for the Alliance. Cause like for me, the Alliance people, I talked to Billy and a couple others, a couple times, and they went through this I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like this gnarly like multi-entity where it's like Billy owns the psychology, because he's a psychologist. So like he owns the like PLLC, which is like, Professional Limited Liability Corporation in New York. So it's sort of like money flows through, I believe for like, I don't know if it's for everybody, but it's like the quote unquote psychology practice, right? In air quotes, or it's really a psychology practice. So like the money flows through there, and then they have an LLC where everyone actually owns that, and the money flows into that, and they decide on like what the money does and crap like that. But they had to like spend a bunch of money on lawyers to figure out like, how do we do this? And my understanding is that I don't want to say they regret it, but looking back when they learned about, I think you guys and maybe somebody else, they were like, oh, we didn't have to do all this gnarly stuff. We could have just kind of done it. Because it sounds like that's what you guys are like, let's just do it. And you were concerned with like, let's create this weird like shell game of legal structures to sort of appease the state, as long as we're not like breaking any major rules or something.
Right.
Yeah.
To back up, and this is one of the questions, is like when I was working in one of these systems, I started late in the game as a therapist. I was in management and did all sorts of other things. And I was looking to get out of the systems, and like everybody in Minnesota was like, well, you can't go independent. You can't go independent because, the insurance companies they don't want to, they don't want to contract with individuals anymore. They just want to go with these bigger systems again, like we said earlier.
Interesting.
And so I don't know. Some friends of mine, actually, they're coming tonight from Chicago. I hadn't seen them in a while, and this guy was a punk rock guy, and he wanted to go see the show Black Flag, or Flag at the time, the original singer. And so we go out to this punk rock. We're old people going to the old punk rock show.
Yeah.
And I run into somebody, a social worker friend of mine there, and I said, look, I'm trying to go independent. I really don't like them working. And she literally looked at me and she goes, you should probably talk to this guy. She points right next to her, and that was Jeff. And that's where I met Jeff at the punk rock show.
Yeah.
And from there, he was an independent who had been doing it for years. And I was like, how the hell did you do that? And we talked about it. And the more we talked about it, the more we found that we had this idea for a collective, and that, Jeff would be better off working with other people and having that feedback and protecting himself from being squeezed out eventually, possibly from the insurance company. And I had the benefit of like, hey, I don't have a clue how to get in, and between the two of us, wouldn't it be cool if there would be another one of us or another one? So we had a lot of coffees and a lot of beers, and we talked it over, and eventually this did happen. And
cool.
The more people we invited on, the more people were like saying, okay, well, you're going to need a lawyer, or hey, we're going to need a biller, or we're going to need, these other things. And we're like, oh yeah, I guess you're right.
So that is another question of kind of who's in charge, because now I get a much better kind of idea. Although there's just more questions, guys. So, but there's one of the written questions was like, who's in charge of which tasks, right? Because there's intake, credentialing, marketing, billing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Is it more like individualized where it's just like you kind of handle all your stuff, right? Like there's no phone person. You call the clients, you schedule blah, 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 or you do your own billing.
That, yeah.
We do that.
Do you pay somebody for billing or?
We all pay collectively for billing. We all pay collectively for an accountant. We all pay collectively for a lawyer. We're all individually responsible for doing all of our scheduling, and we'll help cover the cost of some advertising stuff. But you're responsible for your individual advertising.
Okay. So basically, what the collective payments go to is, other than rent and bills of various kinds, I would assume internet at this point. And whatever else,
water,
electricity,
internet.
Yeah, just like crap in a building. That's the professional term, is crap in the building. And then there's the credentialing. Yeah, so the credentialing, the accounting, the billing, that piece is done collectively for everybody. Well, that also for me, see, I still wonder, I wonder if just like the structures between, say, California, New York, Minnesota, I wonder if they're just like really different, where because do you guys each have to incorporate do you have to have like a professional corporation or are you just de facto like sole proprietor?
It was a professional as independent, but
Just independent, because we have, so in California, like you're de facto, you're a sole proprietor. Like when I left the agency and I started taking, it's called Holman. It's basically like the California version of like Medicaid. It's like people on government insurance. It's like de facto, I didn't have to file for anything. I was just considered a sole proprietor. That was really simple, and I still am. Right. So I didn't have to I didn't need to set up a structure or anything for myself. Right. Do you guys kind of have that? You're just considered independent or independent contractor or?
No, only that. Nope. Well, I guess at that beginning part of that 6 months, that's it. After that, after like when you become an owner, no, it is one company, like LLC is
right.
what it is
okay.
now.
Is it LLC? Is that the structure for Phoenix Mental Health?
That's the way that we get taxed. Yes. And one of the things I'll say about this, because I know some people are like, you're not a nonprofit. No, here's the issue is that nonprofit is a word that works within a capitalist system, but you always have like a board over you, right? If you are a nonprofit, well, those right there, you're creating a hierarchy in bosses. Now, it isn't about profit. I mean, we are the most like collectively owned is not profit when you're right, when you're working, when you make 100% of what you put in.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't think it's important to classify it as nonprofit. I mean, you are we're not just nonprofit, we're anti-profit, basically. But if we wanted to go down this route of saying, no, we're nonprofit, well, now you need a board for that, for legally. Yeah. So it doesn't make sense.
Although I do think, to throw a curveball in, I'm aware of in California, there's a Sustainable Economies Law Center. They're basically like co-op lawyers. They're super rad. They're left psychos like us kind of, and they actually created something called the Worker Self-Directed Nonprofit, which is like a worker co-op nonprofit. And I think they serve as their own board member. Anyway, they created a legal structure to address this issue. It's super new. It's like a couple years old or something like that. And I don't think people are trying it a lot, but it's in response to that exact problem, right? Of just saying you get the board and then you get the funder, you get, and then also the funding, right? Nonprofit industrial complex scrap, right? Where like the funders actually control you essentially, right? You get a grant from the federal government or from the Gates Foundation, and suddenly they say, you can't do X if you want this money. And you're like, shit, right. We need the money now. So right. And then everything you do from there is actually just beholden to the donors. And then, so there's this, the other piece of that. So, okay, cool. So LLC, see, in California, we can't, LMFTs, LPCCs, LCSWs can't form LLCs for their business unless it's like, I was going to ask a question about legal barriers. And this is, I guess we're kind of segueing into that. Like, what legal barriers, because I know of the one, I'm becoming more and more familiar in California with what they are. It almost sounds like you guys just haven't really had many. Like you were just like, we're going to create this thing called Phoenix Mental Health. It's an LLC. We can all be owners of it when we decide somebody's a good fit. That's that. I mean, was that kind of it?
It is. And it really is. And my suggestion is to look at it through this, like, as we were talking earlier, this IWW lens of, well, whether you use the labor board or not, I mean, use it when it's going to be, it's going to be helpful, and then, but don't otherwise.
Yeah, just ignore it otherwise. Yeah.
To create that co-op regardless.
Yeah.
And let them try to fight it in a way. I mean, seriously, because they're going to have a stupid ass fight on their hands, if anything.
Right.
I just want one backup question before I forget, because you're asking about task, and I do think some people are interested in that question. One of the ways that we do this, though, is every year we have 2 retreats, like every 6 months. We meet every week. I don't know if we actually have this. We meet weekly for our basic meeting, hour and a half. Twice a year we have a retreat where it's going to be like all day. It used to be an all day night, but the larger we get, that gets more difficult. And we then divvy up tasks at that time. So financial, business, like, doing contracts, whatever it is. And we try to rotate it as much as possible so everybody gets a flavor for what that is. So everybody kind of has it. You don't have to do it though. It's not forced on you if you're like, no, I ain't doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's helpful.
We rotate it.
Would you say everybody's down? So in that same way, when you ran into the issue of, it sounds like it wasn't a big issue, but once you got to, I think, the 5th, they were like, I don't really want to do the wobbly thing. Have you run into have you run into similar stuff where you're like, oh, rotating roles and this and that, like that kind of really flat structure, rotating, that kind of, what do you call it, anarchist or whatever term? Is there any like, I don't know, tension around some people being like, dude, why can't just one person do the thing? Or why can't why I don't want to do this stupid non-hierarchy crap or something, right? I mean, I guess they wouldn't be a great fit, but does that...
We're open to that for sure. I'm a terrible note taker. I'm really bad at it. And that's a role that I've probably avoided every year. And I'll take on other things because I do want to do things that make me uncomfortable and I do want to learn how to do them better. But, my skill set's probably better in stuff like, recently credentialing. I'm learning how to do that. I hate that, but I'm doing it because I want to learn it and I want to try to beat the system, so to speak.
And would you? So that could be another rotating role, like the credentialer, because I know it's like, okay, you could sort of outsource or not outsource it, but you guys collectively pay for someone to do the credentialing.
Yeah.
But like if you said, well, okay, actually I'll take on some credentialing. I'll try to credential you on Cigna or whatever the hell, right?
Yeah.
And then you could like do it for somebody else in the collective and say, I'll do that. And they'll be like, okay, I'll take on this task because you're kind of taking that on. Is that like a common kind of thing? Yeah.
That's a common kind of how, it's like, the end of family dinner and somebody says, well, I'll do the dishes and I'll wipe down the table.
Right. Exactly.
Everybody
so it's that
jumps
spirit
in.
of it. It is that spirit of the non-hierarchy. Like I'll take out the trash. You do the dishes. I'll cook next Tuesday. Yeah.
Let me back up because you were asking me what my affiliation is. It's more of a realist, and there's no such thing as non-hierarchical. It's somewhere someone's going to perceive a power differential. And one of the things that got us last year, because this was a big one, was the fact that some of us, even on paper, everything looks equal. We had seniority. We've been around the block a few times and had these relationships, and that we got called out on that, which was a very, very, very important thing for us to hear and a really good point for us to grow on and be very, very sensitive to new people coming in. That person was not collaborative material, I think, anyway, and they moved on and they're doing really well. But you have to be recognize that there's no absolutes, period. And so you have to constantly be checking in and constantly checking in with yourself to make sure that you're aware of these power differentials or aware of how people perceive the power differentials.
Here's another question I didn't put on the in the email. I'm realizing between I know another feature of Alliance, and I've considered this for starting up my own thing, or it would be our own thing when it happens, is taking on associates or interns. I don't know if they changed the language, but right. So someone that's pre-licensed, because I know for them, they still, in Alliance, there are, I think, at least a couple, right? So it's like they haven't accumulated their whatever number of hours, but it's still equal wage. But obviously and I haven't asked Billy or others about the details on this, but like, that would mean that they'd have to be supervised. And that means that there would be, because here's another, curveball in the non-hierarchy theory, is that a supervisor-supervisee relationship, there is a hierarchy there. There's a power differential.
Yes, there is. Yes.
And you could like theory your way out. You could try to theory your way out of that. And you could say, well, you could say, I don't know, what postmodern theory, you could try to throw like orientations or something that are like, no, we're all the same. But it's like, at least in California, I don't know if it's like this where you guys are, but like, if I got an associate under me and even if they're at 2,000 hours and I really trust them and stuff, technically their clients are technically my clients as a supervisor. That's how it works legally here. So anyway, I wanted to see if you've talked about that you have people or not, if you're licensed.
Well, one of the reasons we set this up was because right now in this country all over, there's a lot of money being made off interns and this sort of free low. I
think that's probably the primary profit. I think that's the primary point of exploitation outside of insurance companies against us, but
it is indentured service. And these people, we were all there. You'll do whatever you got to do to get that license and get that experience, and you'll do whatever they tell you to do. And that sucks. In our system, one of the things that we insisted upon is we weren't taking on interns. However, we did make an exception for somebody who had a month or two left on there.
Yeah.
And I think what we did there, we had one person kind of supervising and the other person supervising the case notes. So there was a little bit more checks and balances as far as that was concerned. And then I was also working with that person in another area. So we had like 3 people. I'm talking about our latest person who's up for vote next month. We're really excited. And that seems to work.
And that's so your sort of exception is like you're really close to licensure. You're going to be licensed pretty soon. And then we'll set up this temporary system of supervision / note, like someone will actually do the supervision hours. Someone will like kind of review your notes. But we know that we don't really have to baby you, and there isn't any like huge risk or liability around this because you've already gained so much experience, right? But what is your thinking behind like if they're only I don't know, either straight out of grad school or they only have 500 hours under their belt or 1,000? I mean, California, it's 3,000 hours. I don't know if it's different in.
I guess that's where we've run into this. We just end up being sticklers. You have to have we just tend to say you have to have your license.
Okay.
One of the things that does, it assures that, okay, you've probably been in a shitty system. And so once you come work for us, you kind of understand where we're coming from and what we're trying not to be. And that's kind of it. If we start getting into interns, and you know what, I went and got my training, I got licensed, I could take on interns, but it really, the power differential is complicated. And honestly, the systems that I see all around are just gross to me. I'm just going to say that.
And there's two different power differentials within that. Yeah. I can sometimes that we've seen is what is obviously for that person who doesn't have all their hours. Well, they might look at the supervisor as like they need to go and vote on something, but they're scared of what the supervisor would vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So that's one. And the flip side of that is for the supervisor, I hate these words. But anyways, the supervisor would, if they have to keep signing off on all the paperwork from somebody for, the intern or the person with not all the hours, that's extra work for that person. That
you don't get paid. The insurance company ain't going to pay you. The clients ain't going to pay you.
But you are
extra.
Definitely on the hook if they screw up, kind of thing too.
Right.
Well, and that's why I do think, you guys as a contrast from Alliance, I think you have a beautiful model and they have a really beautiful model. And I think theirs would be probably considered more controversial by most people, but it's because it's 40 clinical and non-clinical, because I did the math on my own work and I was like, oh, if I actually looked at the amount of time, the time and labor on shit that I don't get paid for by insurance or self-pay, that's a lot of time. Right. Yeah. And if I was if I just put a $40 sign on the clinical and the non-clinical, and I did that for a couple of weeks, really meticulously out of curiosity, I was like, it actually works out. I'm probably getting paid about that, give or take. And then I have to buy my own insurance and crap like that. So I was like, it's actually kind of clever. I think setting it up that way, it's actually pretty clever, even though, again, controversial. But it does kind of fill in a gap where it's okay, if you're having to do supervisor stuff, if you're any grunt work that's unpaid is actually reimbursed through just the equal wage system they've created. Although again, I know it's probably wouldn't be, most people I've talked to about this are like, hell no, I'd never do that. We don't all get, the ultra flatness of that I think is very unattractive for a lot of people. But
yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I realize I kind of skipped over what's the history of Phoenix. I feel like you touched on it, but if you wanted to say more stuff on it, right? So you're in Minneapolis, Minnesota. when did you, I'll just ask these questions. If you already answered them, you can re-answer them. But when did you form? Was it one people or multiple people together? I think it sounds like it was multiple people. What was the process for getting set up? What were some of the obstacles in getting set up?
Independent. Again, I was like solo.
He was independent first.
Independent.
You were independent. You met Eric at a punk show, right? We got that part.
I brought in another person from another clinic, and so we were a 3-piece for a while.
Okay.
And then,
and you were like wobbly. You just happened to be right.
We were all wobbly.
IWW.
Our punk rock 3-piece.
Punkers,
yep.
Yeah.
But also Eric and the other person really, I mean, this is just a basic example, came from a very toxic therapy clinic that actually was like one of the most popular ones in the area. And yet, I mean, the place is shut down now. I mean, it was that toxic.
Oh, wow.
But, and so I think it was also attractive to do something else. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What did Phoenix mental health? What I mean, it seems a little. I'm like, yeah, Phoenix. You rise, you're doing bad, and then you're doing good later. Was there any particular reason you chose Phoenix mental health as the name?
15 other people left the place I was at, and the idea is like everybody went on either the private practice or they went into these other models. And I was like, the collaborative sounds cool, and yes, the Phoenix part. It seemed to match pretty much my entire career over and over and over again.
In the Phoenix, I don't know. That's like just. I mean, there's definitely like the idea
it's a good
rising up. Also, I grew up here in Phoenix, Arizona, and so
it kind of is a good metaphor for for people who come in. You gotta, you're not doing well. Let's burn it down and start anew.
Yeah.
You got some insurrectionary imagery. You've just got some like healing from trauma imagery. You've just got like Jeff's hometown. You got all of it. You got resiliency from toxic work environment. You got it all kind of matched.
Yeah, very much.
One phrase.
And
nice.
and talking about like trauma, that I want to point out that we're still living in it here. I would like to say it's post-trauma, but it's still, that doesn't mean after trauma. It means with trauma, in my opinion, because we are living in the midst of the George Floyd brutal murder and from the state, and the riots that happened. And I mean, like we're in it, like our clinic was in it, kind of thing. I mean,
our clinic is still in it.
We're still in it, right?
Yeah, I felt almost like silly not bringing this just because you are in Minneapolis. But again, I was like, well, I don't know, in terms of our purpose of talking about worker co-ops and stuff, I didn't have it like on the questions, but like anything you guys want to say about that, since you're right there where some of the gnarliest pieces of the uprising kind of took place, where he was killed and all the aftermath. So you're saying, so first of all, it's still going, right? Like the
trauma is
the trauma, the
community trauma.
Yeah.
There's a lot of community trauma over it. And you know what? We're a part of that. It's all you have to do is get in your car and drive over to George Floyd Square, and it all comes flooding back. And it's a very powerful place. From that place, from that corner, it shook the entire world. What happened there? I mean, people were protesting in Germany and all over the world and it happened right over there.
Right, like our personal houses were like in it, and even during this feels like a different topic, but it's like even in the middle of the riots, like after the police station was burned down and no ambulance or police would come into that area for days. One of the things that we did was we would take a nurse, an actual licensed therapist, and then somebody from the neighborhood, and we went to each house in those neighborhoods to just go, "Are you okay?" And we brought supplies like diapers and any kind of basic medicines and food and stuff like that. A lot of people slammed the doors on us, didn't need us, but a lot of people were like, "Thank you," because I was scared,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we talk about being a part of it, we were a part of it. Like we helped.
And there were tanks camped out across the street from our office, National Guard tanks. And I mean, I got sitting on my front porch these, they shine the lights on you, tell you to get in your house. You could feel the tear gas on your front porch. It's like, dude, what the hell? It was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was crazy. And it could, it could happen like that.
It still feels like the gas is still out there. Yeah.
Do you, I guess in maybe this is an attempted forced connection between what you do, but I mean, when you say, social justice orientation, if people sort of know your clinic as that, as a social justice oriented place to go or something like that, I mean, is there any, and actually maybe, well, it's relevant, but it's a side note, because I just did an EMDR training, one of those like long weekend trainings. It's really exhausting. And I guess the EMDR International Institute or Association, EMDR-IA, they actually added, after George Floyd's murder and everything that happened, they added like racial trauma to like a category, just like kind of anything else, right? There's like sexual trauma, there's, down the line, and then there's like racial trauma, which I thought was really interesting. I was like, that's pretty cool that that's like a category now. And you can get like special kind of trainings in like working with racial trauma, right? So I guess, I don't know, I would suspect that where you guys are, there would be, it sucks to use like capitalist language, but like a higher demand, or you know what I mean, or maybe a higher need for just engaging these discussions and just healing processes. I mean, was there any like direct, like actually people coming to the clinic being like, I need to work through this shit, like what I saw, what I've been through, the tanks being everywhere? Was it just a topic that would come up? I mean, would people come to you directly for this? Like,
we were still heavily involved in Zoom at that time because it was a quarantine situation, and so that added to the weirdness of it. And we're still kind of
all of our clients are in the neighborhood. Like that's
which is weird.
I don't know anyone who wasn't affected. Like not one client who wasn't affected. But it's also as a part of the social. Oh, sorry, Eric.
No. I mean, it was a very strange time for therapy because you are, like with the coronavirus, is like you are also affected by this. So the entire time that you're talking and doing therapy, you are also like expected to share your experience on some level and say, look, it's gonna, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't have a clue what's gonna happen. I can't sit here and tell you it's going to be all right. But it really did affect the way you were delivering services. And the George Floyd experience only just put a whole another layer on top of that. And all of a sudden that sort of thing that you weren't really going deep about somebody's childhood trauma or depression at that time, because we had enough of it going on in the moment. So it was a totally new sort of therapy and a new sort of thing that you had to navigate.
Wow.
Which becomes much more of us versus like individualized therapy for the individual mind, but it becomes about us and what we're going through.
Well, it's a community trauma you were all in the midst of for a very long time. I mean, you're kind of saying that you technically still are, right? It's like nothing's been resolved, right? I mean, everybody's like, okay, want kumbaya time, right? So it's not, I could actually see the like sort of, I'm the helper and you're the helpee. I could actually see that being harder to even maintain, like in that.
You throw political slant in on that about what people are traumatized by. Some people are traumatized by the police, and some people are traumatized by the violence happening in the city. You gotta like be very careful about that and how to navigate and how to help people through it, regardless of where they're coming from or how they're interpreting it.
Just whatever their actual experiences were, I would think. Like you don't want to, just like with anything else, they're like, here's my story.
Right.
The place burnt down next door. I thought I was going to die. I would imagine it doesn't really care what you think politically. That would just be a traumatizing ass thing to experience, regardless of what you think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. When you go back to your point, like how do people identify with us as social justice? I don't know, but they seem to find us in You know, the great thing about where we live now is you can go on and click on our faces and figure out, you know, there's little videos of us talking and you're like, hey, I like the cut of that guy's jib, and they go. And that's, those people seem to find us because of those things. We have the technology there to reach out to those individuals. Like, you know, if I'm not a good fit for you politically, or if I look a little freaky to you, but you know, it's like you trying to find a therapist. What are your algorithms, right?
Sure. Or just on a basic level, you're just like, I don't really feel safe working with a white guy. Then you can work with somebody else, right?
I don't want to work with a white guy.
Completely. And we do try to put, you know, when Eric was bringing up, like, you know, we're trying to create like a diversified like community of therapists, but it's actually, that is totally true. And, you know, like we need a multiracial, multi-gendered, multi-able, you know, workforce. And we do try to, when we say social justice, again, everyone could answer it for themselves, but we actually, so this is like an interesting one for ableism issues, where before we were in this building right now, that we've been in for about 2 years, 3 years, right? We moved in literally the month that the pandemic hit us or whatever. So, but before we were in this place it was in a basement, it's really affordable for us, cheap. And there was stairs that you had to go down.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
within Minneapolis, it's a pretty old city. I mean, I'm sure this is true for a lot of places, but you don't have, like, there isn't a lot of places with like elevators and, you know, different things like this for, you know, the differently able people. And yet when we were looking for a new place, we were like, this is important. And we are paying out of our asses for it to just have an elevator in our place. And none of us has complained about it because we knew that this was important or whatever.
We knew we needed that, and we knew we wanted to be in Minneapolis where everything was happening. You know, we didn't want to move out to the suburbs. We didn't want to do that. And, you know, we to go back to some of those other people, when it happened, they didn't feel safe, and they were like, we're not doing this. And it was kind of like, well, we'll talk about creative solutions, but we can't make any decisions right now because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And those people are like, well, see ya. It's like, well, maybe that you're not part of what we're trying to do here. We're not leaving Minneapolis.
Yeah.
We're needed now more than ever.
I have a couple of those written questions, and I wanted to, I may have said it would only take an hour. I don't remember if I did. So I also want to be respectful of your time and like, just kind of get through. So one, this might be quicker. I feel like we covered this a little bit, but it's how you feel about, because I'm running into this a lot in Santa Barbara. I don't know if this is just like the bouginess of Santa Barbara or this is becoming more widespread, but solo practice therapists who, in air quotes, expand their practice by hiring a bunch of interns and paying them something like a 30% cut, maybe 50% cut, 60% cut, and eventually not even seeing clients themselves. Because they thought the 60 to 80K, what I think is actually like totally decent solo practice pay. It's like totally fine, because they were like, that's not enough. I need to make 100K. I need to make 300, 500K. I need to make $1 million. How do you guys feel about, you don't have to get too mean or anything, but like, how do you feel about, or is it just like to each their own? Like, hey, cool, man. Yeah, man, hustle. Like
as a business owner, you know, and you do whatever you feel as a man on the street. No, fuck you. That's awful. That's gross. It's terrible. Shame on you. You should feel you to go back to your phony liberal bullshit. That is, I'm sorry. That is wrong. That is not part of it. I got into this field because I was helping people with developmental disabilities gain access to mental health like everybody else. And I'm sticking with that. I got to stick to my guns. I can make enough money doing that and still stick to my guns. I don't have to work the system. But they're helping people get their hours. Sorry, I'm going to play devil's advocate. They're helping these interns get their hours toward licensure so they can be like us and have all this freedom. Are they teaching them how to like make money off the backs of young people? Are they teaching them how to be good, socially responsible therapists? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It could work out really well. I'm sure that there's a really fantastic person who's probably worth that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that most of them think that they're that person.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. My only challenge to this when I heard, that they're being, because we're actually minorities as men in the field, and that they're being like, let's say there's a single mom, or there's like where it's just like, man, there's way more shit you have to pay for than I do. That was a challenge to me. I had a conversation with a friend, and they were like, there's no way that I could actually afford a mortgage and kids and all these things if I don't actually pull way more money than our field gets you. And this is the only way that I will be able to do it, is if I hire a bunch of interns. And I was like, oh, well, that's a little less exploitive sounding than I would assume. But I still have the same, I'm just like, if the enterprise doesn't have workplace democracy, then it's exploitative. I have a kind of hard line on it myself.
I went through hell to get my license. I had to work with a lot of complicated systems and people who didn't really care about mine. And so one of the other things as far as is providing a safe space for people to do therapy. And maybe we'll revisit that as some way down the line as far as interns, but right now it's not there.
Here's the last question for you guys. Then you can do something more fun. What tips do you have for me and other therapists who want to do this model, right? Collectives, worker cooperatives. What are your tips for how they can go about doing this?
Well, that's a really good question. The number one though is I believe this is like a philosophical and value wise, but you need to enter into this without thinking about making money. You will end up making money because you have to. Come on, we live in this society. But to remember the mantra of this book from I think the 80s. It's called it's a picture novel book, or whatever, but called "You Don't Have to Fuck People Over to Survive."
Yeah.
And if you remember that, just keep going at it at each point.
It's so true.
I don't need to make money from you. That's the main value you need to remember going into it.
Mm.
I think yeah.
And also, like I was kind of saying earlier, just even if you come from a radical background and you're an anarchist or whatever, you can use all those words without using the words. Basically, try to talk about it more in direct democracy and collectively owned or cooperatively owned, and people are going to get behind that.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I think the biggest thing as far as the model here is to, again, make all your decisions based upon the betterment of the collaborative and not yourself, and realize that there are other people that do not share the same sort of ideas that you have, maybe politically or philosophically even, and remember that those differences only strengthen the collective as long as everybody can remember that it's got to be diverse. Otherwise, it's not. Then it's more of a cult,
right?
And
you were doing that work for a long time. For example, being a band,
being in a band is the same deal.
Individuals playing their own instruments, but coming together and creating.
It's a metaphor I use over and over again. It's like, so-and-so's going solo. Or they're going to put out a solo record. It's probably going to suck. But
sure,
they got to
go solo.
Go do what you do.
Well, it's like there's some great stuff you can pull off solo, but when you put other people in the mix, it actually has the potential to be more beautiful. But I'm kind of hearing you got to trust the process too. You can't be like, okay, the outcome of the music is going to be so much better, and we're going to measure it before it happens and all this shit. You just have to go, no, we just have to kind of like come together and say, we want to do this thing. We have shared values, that we want the music to sound good, and we want playing together to feel good. And we're hoping we can make some money from selling tickets at our shows. Right. I'm still talking about the co-op. I'm just going to bring music. And then you go, okay, cool, let's do it. And then you do a blood pact. I remember Billy was saying about Alliance, where he thought, I kind of wish we could go back in time. We just went into the woods and we just like did like a blood pact or something, instead of like paying the lawyer to figure out the legal structure. It's like it kind of stuck with me. Like it kind of makes more sense to just be like, are we in for this shit or not? Right. And then the structure, the legal crap and the money and all that will kind of flow through the collective process you develop, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And right now, I think we got the best band that we've ever had. I think right now we've all been through some stuff. We've argued. Remember that arguing and having differences of opinion is also important to the collaborative. That is part of the process. And if you don't have that, then you're not talking honestly, I think.
Yep.
Of course, my mantra is, if you haven't been fired from a job or two, you're probably not living in accordance with your values. That's sort of my mindset.
And we all, and also to remember that none of us grew up on these models. None of us did.
No.
So it will be learning, and you will have learning pains, but that's okay, or growing pains. Excuse me. But that
you have to trust it.
You do. I mean, and it really also, even for people who've come from like community groups of learning consensus and rusty rules of orders and all these different stuff or whatever. Well, I gotta say, it feels very different to say your livelihood, your financial livelihood is based upon this, versus a community group where I'm like, I'm pissed, I'm out. Kind of thing.
Yeah. You can just go home and say, I don't like these people, or
I
don't like the decision that was made. Yeah.
Right. And so there's got to be trust as well, based upon the decisions, and not thinking that somebody's going against you just because they're not agreeing with
I've been outvoted many times in this collaborative.
Yep, same here.
Sometimes the sole vote, and I have to trust that these people know what's better for the collaborative.
Right. You have to trust.
And that is a very humbling thing, and you have to do it. Otherwise, you don't need to be collaborative.
And also through trauma, there's some beauty that can come out of it. Like, I don't know, we've had definitely we've had our trials and tribulations. Last summer, we had one of our co-owners was, right when she was coming into work, was stuck in the middle of a gunfight right outside.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And that was traumatic. And what did that look like for the collective? What do we do with such a situation?
We brought in an objective party and did a restorative justice group therapy session for all of us, because we all have very different opinions about where we are. Well, we still do, but being respectful to those other people and trying to find solutions to make it happen. And we're doing that now better than we ever have, I think.
Yeah. Shit, I realized I had another big question. Yeah. Can I ask one more and then we go?
Yeah, one more.
Sorry.
Sure.
Okay, unless you really have to go. It's actually on, because this is a debate I'm having internally, and I'm talking about with a friend about the use the term anarchist or not. Because here's actually a challenge to that, I think, maybe, which is so let's say and I vibe a little bit more probably with the term socialist. I used to with anarchist, but I'm not. I'm fine. I don't care. Let's say in theory that there's actually a whole bunch of small businesses in America that run like co-ops, but they don't say that they do, and they're not engaged in movement building, and they actually don't have any plan to be a part of a movement or to change society. They just sort of think internally it feels better to do it while the world burns, right? While capitalism continues to just sort of fuck everything up indefinitely. My challenge to that is, doesn't it make more sense for all these workplaces to sort of federate together, be engaged in some sort of public facing something or other, right? And again, I think I'm not comparing you guys to Alliance at all. That's probably annoying, but I know they have it's like a fourth. They have something on their website. It's like capitalism is making us sick, blah 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 blah, right? So they're just out front, totally, right? And they have the picture of themselves with the circle A. And I thought when I first saw that, I was almost like, because I almost think the other side of that is, I could say, so what is this, like just virtue signaling in Brooklyn? Like, of course you can fucking do this, right? Like you can be a bunch of like in your 20s or 30s in Brooklyn, New York, and you can say we're anarchists and socialists, and you'll have a full caseload in 20 minutes, right? Santa Barbara, California, like someone might call the cops on you for doing that. Just be like, oh my God, there's rabble rousers. So that's me saying, like, I think that's over the top dope as hell that like Alliance is doing that. And I kind of wish that every workplace that was operating as a collective was doing it. And then I also see that there's like huge potential drawbacks. Like I was saying, for me, it might be a target on my back for doing it, but I kind of think that it's still important. So I like, as maybe a final thing, right? Like, do you guys think, it sounds like you've had internal debates about this, and people have different views on it, but like, do you see the sort of dilemma, right? That if you're too quiet and too apolitical and stuff, that like, it's not really movement building and it just sort of feels good with your homies in the band, versus we gotta be out there saying what we believe and everything.
Yep. I think that's a really
I think it's an ongoing discussion. That one's you're not gonna have an answer for it. You have to continually check in with it. Just because your band's all wearing anarchy t-shirts and has mohawks does not make you, it makes you a brand. You know, it doesn't mean that you're actually doing any of those things. I really like those guys in New York, and I want to like hang out with them more, and because they're my peeps, you know.
Yeah, right. Of course, exactly.
But you know, and that'll challenge us. Like, do we need to step it up a little bit more and be a little bit more political? And that is an internal debate that we've already had. I mean, there's stuff that Jeff has wanted to post specifically about the civil unrest here, and it was like, not everybody's doing that. So it does. There's a compromise in there that's really difficult to get to, and you know, at what point does that like hinder action? Again, it's an ongoing question that you have to have, I think, and a constant one.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And that I'd also say that doing co-op work or collective work, workers co-op, be clear, or collective work, is not inherently revolutionary. It's revolutionary in our field. It's not revolutionary. It doesn't, without federating and creating a power base, it is not a threat at all to capitalism. You can easily exist within it, kind of thing. So the bigger work would be to federate, non-hierarchical, of course, bottom up. And the main reason is to create that power base. And so people do know it in the movements. And then, again, clients, whatever words you want to use, do know that, like, wait, this clinic might not be that politically active, but they're a part of this. And they have an understanding of what this is about, like social justice or whatever. But one of the things that it feels like this is like a longer thing is like one of the reasons I don't always like these terms too, like when we say like anarchists or whatnot, is because some people end up going into this thing where it's like, now I'm trying to be more radical than thou, and we get into like anti-psychiatry kind of stuff. And do I think there's a place for some of that? Sure. Yep. But I'm much more interested in like how we organize our daily lives and our work and our communities than I am to tell you that your mental health doesn't exist, kind of thing.
Once you get into that room with that other person, you know, you have to be objective, and you're going to have to set aside a lot of this stuff. And, you know, it's not about me at all at that point. And that's something that we all do. I'm about to do it. Sometimes it's happening.
Yeah. I also could see there being a danger to like getting, because some of these things, anarchist, whatever left-wing label you want to use. In the US, these are fringe ideologies and movements. And you could actually get some, I mean, this isn't sort of, I don't know, shaming of our clients or whatever. Like, you could get some fringe, I don't know, some people with just certain, you could start just attracting people that have, I don't know how to, I'm realizing I'm going to sound like an asshole if I really say, like, you could be attracting people that have really weird ideas about things, and they're expecting the therapy process to kind of avoid actually doing what we do in therapy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, come in there and just be like, so help me figure out how to like Molotov cocktail the place. And you're like, or something weird, or like, here's what I read Mao did to like, kill all the landlords, or like, I could just see it getting weird if you're not a little careful about like, why are we putting this hard ideology out front? I feel like it would have to get thought through a bit of like why you're doing it, and like what that conversation looks like. Essentially, as like a healthcare provider, right? When someone comes to your door and you're like, okay, now what's it look like? So I could see there being another side to it. Yeah. We're
not doing anything really different as far, if you look at the bigger picture. The school of psychology has only been around for 200 years, right? And it started off with a very white sort of like patient. I mean, when Carl Rogers came around, that was pretty punk rock. I mean, and yet, it's hopefully
just validate.
Yeah, that's
just listen. It's healing.
And it's still growing, and there's all sorts of new therapies popping up all the time. And you're like, what? And you have to like challenge the system itself, because it's obviously not meeting the needs of what we have right now. We are going through a huge piece of that right now in our overall culture. And recognize that you can affect positive change within it. And there's a lot of places for creativity for it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. We're like 40 minutes over what I thought it was going to be. I think my partner may have actually stayed out of the kitchen where I am to give me space, even though I told her that she could be in the background. So I'm gonna give her access to the kitchen.
There you go.
Have some food. It was really amazing talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow up with an email that the Therapist Worker Co-op's website I made. I want to talking to Billy about this, of having like some sort of bullet list of the features of the different models that there are. Because like, again, to sort of encourage other therapists when they come across this info, we could do it like this, we could do it like that. Let's come together and have conversations about what we want to do. So I want to follow up with you guys on that later. And it's just really incredible. I think just as sort of kindred spirits, right? Like I came out of the, just people that think alike in this way, have similar, whether you want to call it politics or values. It's really like, for me, it's really kind of healing, because I think a lot of us, like, we feel alone in the field oftentimes, where we think, man, do others, are they thinking about the stuff I'm thinking about? And then if I bring it up, are they just going to like turn their back on me because they think it's weird or irrelevant? Because we're all just individuals and there is no society, like Margaret Thatcher's of the dominating the therapy world. So thank you guys so much for this conversation.
Massive thank you as always to our VIP patrons: Alex Placito, Bruce Rogers Vaughan, Jennifer Cox, Justin Harper, Rebecca Johns, Seamus O'Connell, and Sheena Bilmus.
If you have enjoyed anything you've heard Harriet say in this program, you will definitely enjoy Capitalism Hits Home, which is a solo program that Harriet does through Democracy at Work, which is a worker-owned cooperative that produces other great programs such as Economic Update with Richard Wolff and the Anti-Capitalist Chronicles with David Harvey. I can't recommend enough that everyone also listen to Capitalism Hits Home if you enjoy It's Not Just in Your Head.
And you can hear more from Harriet on her radio show called Interpersonal Update. It's on WBAI at 2:30 EST on Wednesday afternoons and in the WBAI archives.